Hi everyone, and welcome to tonight's SAGA session. And my name is Tobias, and I'm the host for the evening. SAGA is the Swedish annual Game Design Awards, and we hold these SAGA sessions twice each month to spread knowledge about board game design and design-related topics. And we do this in collaboration with Studiefrämjandet in Stockholm and the Swedish Discord channel Speldesign Babbel. For each of these sessions, we have invited a special guest who will do a presentation on a topic of their choice. And tonight we have invited Cristoffer Wiker. I'm not sure how to pronounce your last name in English, but I hope I didn't butcher it. You have spent years designing games in both digital and tabletop worlds, and leading creative teams. And you have been tinkering with prototypes on the kitchen table as well. Okay, and tonight you will talk about designing games with the product or audience audience in mind. And I am super excited to hear what you have to say. So without further ado, I will pass over to you. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Here we go. I'll try to share now. Let's see. Yes, here we go. And then I'll catch my notes. And there are. So, hi everyone. My name is Cristoffer Wiker, as Tobias told you. I have a long history of being interested in game design. It goes back to the early 80s when I first started designing stuff. Mostly then it was role-playing games or adventures, and later writing for different companies. And anyway, this passion of mine went so far as I started working in the digital game industry, and for the last couple of almost 10 years now, I've been working as a design manager in the digital part of the industry. So with that in mind, there's stuff that bleeds over a lot, and that specifically product versus player, and who comes first, or can you do both, and so forth. So this will hopefully help you a little bit. So today we're going to explore one of the things that I think is most defining for tension in board game design, specifically the designing part. It's if you focus on the product itself or the player who will have the experience of playing it. This description might sound a little bit philosophical, but it affects every practical decision that we make when we design games. It is probably something that you've discovered over your time when you're prototyping your game, but specifically it comes down a very, I would say, you find it very easily when you start teaching your game, because then it becomes very it becomes very obvious which route you went with the game. Anyway, in product design terms, these two mindsets map closely to the concept of object-centered or user-centered design. This is something, the balance between it, at least, is the beauty and the function of the artifact that we call a board game. But with that in mind, the balance between them is quite delicate, because we're not really shaping an object, but an experience. And that experience changes every time it's played, more or less. So let's see, let's switch. Yes. So why does this matter? every design starts from somewhere, usually an instinct or sometimes a mechanic, sometimes an emotion. It totally depends on where you're coming from and who you are as a designer. Maybe you start with a clever system. I usually do. And then I discovered that I was sparking up the wrong tree, and I have to throw everything away and start over. But with that in mind, it's sort of like you start from somewhere, that clever system, or perhaps you're chasing a feeling, a tension, like a surprise, cooperation, you know, some delight, something that you really want the players to feel when they play that game that you figured out. This instinct usually like shapes your workflow and your production priorities, and specifically your playtesting methods as well, because that will help shape your game later on. So depending on if you are the ones that really enjoys mechanisms, or mechanics or systems, you're likely very invested into balancing, interaction, depth, and cleverness of games. That's what we call a product first instinct. So if you start from an emotional or an empathetic way, you probably prioritizing pacing, accessibility, and the social textures of play. That's the player first instinct then. And recognizing that these tendencies have an early behavioral part to your design. Specifically, it will allow you to compensate for it specifically, because both paths risk imbalancing, not imbalancing, it risks imbalance if taken to the extremes. When you make a sort of like a too complex system that nobody plays, or an experience that is so light of game that it's more of a play session than anything else. It's not even a game anymore. But that's taking it to the extreme, that is. So I worked in UX design before, and there we talk about something called design intent and user mental models. It's a product-focused design. A product-focused designer tends to build from intent outwards, defining what the object should be. A player-focused designer builds from the user inwards, like observing how real people engaged and adapting accordingly. Both are very valid. Like nothing is better than the other. It's just different mindsets. But what matters is knowing which direction you're traveling in and why. I am talking too fast, I think. I should slow down a little bit. Oh,
No, it's fine.
So here we have it. So 2 lenses. These lenses will define, or actually, let's define these lenses more clearly. Like a product-focused approach means designing outward from the thing, the mechanisms, the components, the form. It's the craftsperson's instinct, where elegance in system and beauty in materials feel like the heart of the design, so to speak. Here we can use games like Root from Leader Games or Spirit Islands. You know, they really embody these mindsets, I believe. Both are mechanically dense, highly systematic games that build identity through rules and depth. Their players invest heavily in mastery, which makes their long-term engagement strong, but their onboarding barrier is high. I don't know if you guys have tried to teach people Root, but it's a slog. It's going to take quite a while to get there, unfortunately. And that's what happened when you go with a systems heavy design first and take it all the way. So then we have the player focused approach. It begins with experience, what it feels like to play, how easy players can enter flow, how social energy flows around the table. Here, games like Codenames, Czech Games Edition, or Azul maybe, comes from this tradition. They focus on immediacy, clarity, and repeatability. Their systems are lean, their feedback loops fast, and their component design communicate purpose. Player-focused games sacrifice some mechanical intricacy for immediacy, and that trade-off is most often deliberate. And here comes our role as designers. It isn't to pick one permanently, but to navigate between them. You can start from the product and refine for players, or you start from players and build product identity later. The key is to stay consistent of which lens you are using when making decisions. Like from component count to rule clarity, from price point to replayability, anything like that needs to be considered. So yes, we get to move these product slides further. Anyway, it's important to balance these through awareness, because otherwise it becomes too heavy on one end, and they might become hard to define. Or they'd be easier to define, but harder to reach a wider audience, I would say. So, product-focused design. They're driven by systems. So, product-focused design, when we talk about this, we're talking about a mindset rooted in craftsmanship, the delight of mechanical elegance, material quality, systemic beauty. It's about the thing itself, like what it looks like, how it feels and behaves as an engineered object. It's when you sit there and you find this fantastic loop that you've figured out, and you go through it, you put it into a prototype, and it starts moving, and you start testing it, and it works, and it's smart, and it functions. So in the world of board games, this often manifests in systems that would reward mastery and reveal depth over time, mostly. Again, root a classic. We can take like I remember Cole Worley, the designer. He described Root as an ecology of competing powers. Each faction follows its own unique rule set, creating asymmetric tension and emergent storytelling. That asymmetry is a hallmark of product-focused design. It's intricate, it's distinctive, and full of mechanical identity. But that being said, it's also very hard to get people into it, because they have to learn each part on their own, more or less. Each one will be playing their own game, more or less. But as said before, all of this comes with a trade-off. The onboarding curve is steep, and an understanding of the shared ecosystem requires cognitive investment, It's just teaching a route is harder than designing it, probably. But with that in mind, it's sort of like when you design something that's that functional and smooth and interesting, it's important to remember that there's a player there as well that needs to be taught. Other example includes, we've talked about Spirit Islands before, and with that, there's a systemic complexity enables deep cooperation and tactical richness, but raises accessibility barriers. Or Twilight Imperium, for that matter, which achieves unmatched narrative scope at the cost of a 6-hour session plus, and that extensive rulebook. In a product-focused design, you get clarity of identity, but not necessarily clarity of entry. And that's fine, specifically for the hobbyist audience. They have the time. They don't care about the friction that it can feature. They are invested into the hobby, so they'll take the time to learn. But for broader reach, designers must balance the ambition with player onboarding, teachability, and physical usability. Good product focus works, feels crafted, it feels memorable, and it feels cohesive. But it must learn to be empathetic to the players to become truly great. Here we go. So, player-focused design. Yeah, there we go. Now it's time to turn that lens to the player focus. Player focus begins with empathy, mostly, like observing how people actually behave around the table. This mindset borrows heavily from human-centered design and service design thinking, starting from desired experience and builds backwards. So here you just, what do you want the player to feel? What do you want the player to remember after they've stopped playing? That is it. That is the player-focused design. So a strong example here, again, code names. Schwartel, well, he talks a lot about it, like the idea came from nothing, it didn't, because he noticed that people enjoyed giving, he saw that people enjoyed giving indirect clues and watching others interpret them. So the prototype started as a torn piece of paper slips with words. Only after a dozen of casual tests did some sort of structure emerge, and everything unnecessary was stripped away until only the core tension, the clue, and the interpretations remained. That's pure player focus, like observe, simplify, amplify, and you will get to that type of game in the end. That being said, it can sort of like be hard to get there. So if you don't want to strip away as much, you can do what they did with, for example, Azul. It was designed by Michael Kiesling, and he built it around a tactile, visible pleasure, drafting tiles and assembling the mosaic. But he made sure that the rule set could be explained in under 3 minutes. That was the important part, because if that wasn't there, it just didn't work. So Azul leveraged player psychology, like, now I'm going to butcher this, autoletic let's see, no, autotelic play. That's the word. It's hard thinking in English sometimes. Autotelic play, the pleasure of arranging stuff. That's the real. So the understanding of that word. And flow state, like clear goals, immediate feedback, nothing you have to worry about. And when you got that, and when he got that and smashed it down to those 3 minutes of teaching, he had a game that people enjoyed, and he keeps designing expansions to it. But that being said, player first design prioritizes always is immediately understanding what can I do now as a player. It's the emotional rhythm, the tension, the release, and the satisfaction. The social usability, because you wanted to work with mixed groups. It's kids, older, middle-aged, and it's different people from different strides of life, and most often minimal downtime to make everybody feel involved all the time. But there are trade-offs here as well. Player-focused design risks blending together, unfortunately. So you have to keep it clean, you have to keep it efficient, but sometimes that just becomes forgettable if you go too far. So without a distinct hook or production identity, this can vanish from memory once the novelty wears off. So sometimes a game will be a hit with the bigger crowds and then just be forgotten within a couple of months because the hook was not interesting enough, unfortunately. So the trick here is to ensure that player focus does not mean featureless. Player empathy must always be balanced with product personality. Here we go. So compare the focus. Let's see what, here we go. So it's sort of like if you have the, what's that? I have written this into this broke. Okay, here. In practice, the best modern game hybridizes. Look at Wingspan, for example. Elizabeth Hartgrave, the designer, began from a player-centric impulse. She wanted to make a game about birds that feels relaxing. But she infused in it with that meticulous product-focused detail, like custom components, illustrated cards, the dice tower, the strategic depth. Yeah, and here her production partner, Stonemaier Games, explicitly documented how component quality is used as an affordance, not just as a decoration, but a cue for interaction. So with this in mind, it worked. So the deeper lesson here, product-focused and player-focused are not opposites. They're complementary forces to each other. You use product focus to define identity and integrity, and player focus to ensure empathy and adoption. Balancing both is what turns a good design into a lasting one. Here we go. Streamline. Yes, each has trade-offs. When focus drifts. So when focus drifts, design focus rarely remains fixed. Project matures, or we all encounter drift. It's a slow, often invisible shift in our priorities when we design. A system that began as an elegant mechanism grows ornate with new subsystem. It becomes complex, or you cut away everything and you start on something does not work, and you clean something out, you start over, you take something away, you add a mechanism from another game that all of a sudden you just remembered, and squeeze it into that because it was just the top of your mind. But with that, a system that began as this elegant mechanism grows ornate with new subsystems. A lean experience becomes over-tuned for clarity, losing all tension. Understanding the why here, that drift, why it happens, is one of the most valuable meta skills in design management. We see it all the time in my line of work. Designers sit on their own. They think, they write stuff, and then they come back with a new prototype or a GDD, as they call it, game design document, and they just have gone bananas one way or the other without actual, forgotten why they did it. They did one thing, and then that drift happened because they forgot about all the other small movements over time. So drift can stem from cognitive bias. It's called sometimes the IKEA effect. It's where we overvalue what we've built, or the sunk cost fallacy that prevents cutting features. It can also come from feedback imbalance. You hear mostly from your friends, fans, or loved ones. They love what you do. They like what you have done. They probably love the complexity, because if you ask other designers to play test your things, we are, as they say, a bunch dedicated to understanding and visualizing complexity sometimes. That means that we might not be the best target audience testing group, so to speak. So playtesting should probably be done on someone who prefers the simplicity of it. As design leaders, our task is not to eliminate drift, but to detect and respond to it. So just because drift happens, that's nature. That's what happens. But again, it's important that you just acknowledge it and see it for what it is, and don't forget that you can sort of like use that to your advantage as well. With that, one technique used by different studios is the design lens check. Before major milestones, the designer asks, what's driving this change? The product or the player? Writing that answer down forces alignment within the design team or yourself. It depends on how many of you are there, but it at least focuses that you. It's simple but powerful. Just acknowledging that by asking yourself that question. Sorry for forgetting to update these. For some reason, everything had slid forward a bit. So, play testing through each lens. Here comes some feedback, or like when testing through a product lens, you're validating mechanical integrity. Does the system produce the intended dynamic that you're looking for? I would say this is where you test balancing, resource loops, probability curves, and pacing. You might also use solo simulations or structured checklists. It's some designers use this phase to verify that the engine runs predictably before exposing it to new players as well. But again, it's what you decide to do. Just be wary that this is something that will happen. So, different questions. So, let's see. When testing through the player lens, you're studying experience. How does it feel? How long before engagement in that particular thing that you've designed? Where does the confusion arise? So you're looking at people, it calls for silent observation, just looking at the players, not engaging, not, a lot of people want to come in and sort of like, oh, that's not how it works, or, or this is how it works. It's important to just sit there and watch, because that confusion or that struggle that they come up with will give you like a really good insight into how the game is perceived and played. But the design greatness here is an act of empathy, you shouldn't see them as testing session. You should see them almost like, a conversation or a listening session. You, as a designer, you sit there, you listen, you take in all the emotions and all the behavior of the people. You note down the results, but also the tone in the room, specifically if it's, is it silence? Is it frustration? Do they laugh? Do they talk? Do they jest with each other? It's all of this is player data. All of this is they're like as vital as numbers. Here, the key, I think, is alteration. You need both lenses to avoid local optimization, like fixing system balance by ignoring joy or perfecting flow while undermining challenge is, not great. Teams that treat playtesting as a multi-phase empathy loop, mechanism, usability, emotion, consistently deliver stronger designs. This is something that we've seen over and over in design teams that I've run. So, design cost and complexity. Every decision we make has a production shadow. Product-focused design tends to inflate that shadow. More unique components, more manufacturing steps, more artwork, more complexity to manage, bigger box, all that. Like player-focused design constrains that. It's reusing parts, simplifying visuals, keeping box and rules compact. They are sort of like on different sides of the same spectrum. Some games, they just look and feel like it's, what do we say? It feels like hugging an old friend, more or less, because they have that emotional comfort that players, look for in games. The game box is nice. It's soft, not soft, but it has rounded edges. It's not hard, and it has maybe UV coating, whatever. It's the right amount of colors for that target audience. That's where you actually hit the point. You squeeze into that box. You squeeze the right amount of extra products, like a dice tower, tokens, inserts, you name it. All those things, they need to be justified by the dual lenses. Does it enhance play feel? and table appeal. This mindset comes from applying product design principles like affordance and signifier, concepts coined by some a person called Don Norman, if you want to look it up. An affordance invites action. For example, tokens usually invite collection, and trace invites order into the game. This alignment between aesthetic form and player behavior is what industry designers call coherence. On the business side, product-heavy games usually sits at what, 60 to 90 MSRP, in that range at least. That's things like Root and Skite tier usually. Those are targeting hobby enthusiasts, the audience willing to pay for depth. Player-focused designs like Codenames and Azul that we previously talked about, they succeed at the $25 to $40 range, where simplicity and accessibility fuels volume sales instead. Both model works, but they serve different ecosystems. One is the boutique hobby retail versus the broad family market. And this is important to remember when you're designing as well. Like where do you want to see your game? For us that are mostly hobby enthusiasts, it's probably easier for us to reach the hobby market, while getting into the mass market is harder because you have to make so many games or be able to make the amount of product that they crave at a specific time. Not that it's harder or easier to just make the game, it's just how the product in itself needs to be delivered. But that is, anyway, knowing your intended balance early helps you avoid heartbreak later. A lavish design that can only sell for 30 is not sustainable. A simple filler built with deluxe components will confuse your market. The alignment between product ambition, player value, and manufacturing reality is the cornerstone of sustainable game design really today. And that's unfortunately where a lot of Kickstarters today go astray, as you sometimes see these fantastic looking games. Those small go way overboard with art and components, and they just become immensely more costly than they would have ever been produced for a shop. So they only sell in the Kickstarter, but never later on in the store, because they're just overproduced and they're just too costly to have on a shelf in a hobby shop. And then that's also why we see all these miniatures in more or less every Kickstarter, because in Kickstarter they go outside of this framing, because you don't see the entire thing, but because you follow it, so you are more likely to put more money into to the product than you would be if you were in a shop, because you can see all the intricate parts and you get to follow along usually with the product as it grows, because usually they don't have all the parts ready when launched, but they actually want you to help unlock more features in it. And that's feature creep and feature drift usually. And in the end, you will have a product that are so immensely costly or huge, because if enough people, kickstarted, it will just be this enormous box that's impossible to bring anywhere, or it's just going to stay at home because it just weighs too much to bring anywhere without taking your car and shove it into your trunk. Okay. Yeah. So, how to shift mid-design. When we talk about adjusting focus mid-design, we're really talking about humility and observation. Many games begin one way and end another. I don't know how many times I've started a design that started as a simple thing and just went completely haywire along the way and ended up as the most complex, Rube Goldberg device, more or less, and in the end. So it just makes how you feel about it, how you think about it. And here is the most important part, is that we need to think about adjusting focus mid-design. For example, Scythe from Stonemaier Games, it started as a deeply asymmetric combat game, but through iteration and player feedback, it evolved into something more about economic pacing and controlled tension. So a lot of people that bought into the game, they saw something else than that it actually was. So a lot of the first people that wanted to buy it, they saw a really cool, war game, more or less, a battle game. But what they got was an economic game, and there was a lot of sad voices being heard when they started playing that game, because they saw something and they got something else. So how do you know when to shift? There's usually 3 key signals here. First, I would say that when your play tests are consistent, but enthusiasm has dropped, that often means your product system works, but the emotional rhythm is off. It's a sign to move towards the player lens, so to speak. And second, when your player says they get it, but don't return, that's a retention issue. The game satisfies curiosity, but not engagement. In product design terms, that's a lack of delight or affordance for mastery. Third, when your production planning starts to dominate your decision making, we've already paid for that molds, or we can squeeze in 50 more cards without actually adding to the cost, or we have already ordered 400 extra dice, whatever, or we can't cut the wooden meeple, whatever. That's a clear signal that the product constraints are driving designs. That's not play experience. So the best way to recalibrate is to create parallel prototypes. And I know this is going to sound weird, but hear me out. Make a lean version stripped to its essentials, and a feature-rich version that explores your original ambition. Run both through testing. See which one earns energy around the table. You'll almost always find truth somewhere in between. None of them will be the one end all be all. This is something that I've done in the past. I've made a really complex game, and then because it takes so much time to construct it and get it to playtesting, I usually take parts of it and just slice it down into a very, very much simpler version. And then we take that and test that to see just one of the loops, or even maybe a very stripped down version of the game, just to see if it works or not. And sometimes that is what players engage with, or they have a feeling of, oh, that was cool, I would like to see more of that. And then you can, take more from that bigger bulk of game that you've designed with lots of systems and sprockets and everything. And let's see, where were I? Yes, you almost always find truth somewhere in between, as I said. Think of this as the industry design feedback loop, balancing feasibility, can we make it, that is, with viability, like will it sell, and desirability, like will they love it, who will love it. IDEO of product design fame, they popularized this model in product design, and it applies perfectly to board games as well. So again, feasibility, viability, and desirability. Can we make it? Will it sell? And will they love it? In essence, shift focus whenever your process starts answering the wrong questions. If you're pushing components while players are still unsure what to do, you're too product first. If you're rewriting rules endlessly to accommodate every possible player, you're too player first. Revisit your core. What experience did you want to create? And what object can best hold it? If you do that enough times, you will have a good core of a game. There we go, hold parallels. So, framework for reflection. Here's a simple framework I use when mentoring designers. The focus map. Like, take a blank page, draw two axles. The horizontal axis is the product to player, and the vertical axis is complexity versus accessibility. Now plot your game's current state based on how you've been making decisions lately. Are you optimizing rules and components before understanding the player journey? You're probably drifting right on the product axis. And if you're simplifying relentlessly, cutting mechanisms before testing their potential, you're probably drifting left on the player axis. Next, map your intent. Where do you want the game to sit in this space? A heavy asymmetric war game might intentionally live in the upper right. Complex and product-driven. Family game must belong lower left. It needs to be accessible and player first. The key here is alignment between intent and execution. Misalignment is where frustrations happens. So both for you and for the players that's going to play the game, and testers, of course. So think of it as applying this double diamond design. If you ever try that, it's a good model for product development. Diverge to explore widely, experiment without judgment, then converge to focus, commit to what serves the experience. And you rinse, repeat this. This is a really good exercise to do in group if you have a couple of designers and you want to help each other develop a product or game, sorry. Great design alternates between these modes consciously. In tabletop terms, prototype with freedom, then cut mercilessly based on what playtesters reveal. I don't remember who wrote this, but good design is as little design as possible. It's sort of like a good mantra to have in the back of your head. like awareness is that what turns iteration into refinement rather than noise is the important here. So let's see, did I forget something? So the important here, ask what is my game really about, and trace if your fixes serve product or player. And some lessons from practice. When you've designed enough games, patterns start to emerge. You'll see that you have sort of like a way of designing stuff. It's not just mechanically, but it's how you think as a designer, or how your team thinks as a designer, as designers, depending on if you're more than one person designing stuff. Product-leaning designers often find it's harder to let go of the artifact, that thing that you're making. They just love that sculpted mini, the perfect card back, the intercut interlock of system, you know. I am very much here as a designer myself when I put that hat on. Anyway, yet that player doesn't see the elegance if they can't feel it. Watching blind play tests quietly, resisting the urge to teach, can be very transformative here for this type of designer. You'll discover that what you thought was intuitive may only be familiar to you. And that's the key takeaway here. Anyway, in contrast, player-leaning designers often avoid friction too early. They watch players struggle and immediately smooth over the challenge. They remove everything. It's sort of like, oh, friction, be gone, go away. But friction here is when purposeful used, it's engagement. Again, a lot of games succeed precisely because it demands early discomfort. Mastery is part of its messaging. It's really hard to know when you're doing it right, but if you at least acknowledge that it exists, you're halfway there. The mature designers learn, let's see, here we go. So mature designers learn to separate frustration from depth. Frustration without purpose is just poor design, unfortunately. Friction with purpose creates flow. In industry design, this parallel tolerance, the acceptance level of resistance in a joint mechanism, a perfect fit doesn't mean zero resistance. It means enough resistance to feel intentional. Likewise, in board games, a little struggle teaches mastery. Because if it's just too easy, it would be too easy to master, and then it wouldn't be interesting enough. So that's the hard part, is making it just enough, the Goldilocks section of it, or as we say in Sweden, lagom. I often tell junior designers, a game that never challenges its players never becomes their story. So this is important when you look at it through observation, or like how you, when players play your games, or how they talk after the session. Do they discuss mechanisms or moments? The answer tells you where your design is living, if it's in the product or in the player. So if they start discussing mechanisms, it's in the product, but if they talk about the moments, the shared moments that they had together, it's player focused. And this is good to know that this can actually be the same game, depending on how well you balance this out. So starting to get close here now. Takeaways: awareness and adaptability. Let's see if I actually put that here. Yes, here we go. Awareness and adaptability at this stage, I like to step back and reflect on what awareness means in practice. When we talk about product or player focus, we're really talking about the balance between expression and empathy. Product-focused expresses the designer's intent through the object. The crafted system, the tactile detail, the elegance in its internal logic, the cogs spinning. Player-focused represents empathy. The designers care for how others will receive, interpret, and enjoy that system. Both are acts of love, I would say, but different kinds. The key skill as you mature in design is shifting lenses deliberately. When you feel stuck, when a mechanism feels brilliant but playtests poorly, or when a game feels smooth but unremarkable, pause and ask yourself, which lens am I using right now? And what would happen if I shift? This ability to oscillate is what separates experienced designers from beginners, usually. It's hard to know about if you don't know about it, but as long as you know about it, it's easier to actually think about it and then make it happen. It's not about the balance, but it's about the clarity and the intent. It's fine to make product-first games for hobbyists if you do so consciously. It's fine to make family-friendly games, player-first games, if that is your goal. What's dangerous is designing unintentionally, serving neither fully. And that's the important takeaway. From a product standpoint, adaptability also means scaling ambition to fit resources and audience. A lavish, component-heavy design works because it's aimed at an audience that values premium experience and can support that MSRP. Conversely, minimalism design thrives on that minimalism, but both succeeds by aligning product focus with audience expectations. In short, awareness and adaptability are your best tools here. They'll let you navigate the craft's contradiction without losing your voice. And that's important. It's your voice that you want to come across with. So use both lenses intentionally. So, closing thoughts. Let's see here. Between expression and empathy, I'd like to bring us back to why this conversation that we've had matters. We are at heart both designers and storytellers. Every rule, every piece, every choice is part of how we communicate with our players. Some of us speak through the product, through craftsmanship, precision, clever mechanism. Others speak through the experience, through the flow, through the emotion, accessibility. The most powerful design speaks fluently in both languages. So games like these reminds us that diversity of focus is what keeps this medium vibrant. Each game approaches balance differently, but all of them invite their players to do something deeply human. It's about curiosity, it's about mastery, it's about connection. And as you return now to your own prototypes, take a moment to name your current focus. Ask yourself, am I crafting an artifact or an experience? Am I designing with as much as for? And what happens when I invite players into the conversation earlier, for example? the craft of board game design is not perfection. It's attention to the object, the player, and the invisible bridge between them. And yeah, thank you for sharing this presentation with me. I hope these ideas support you as you refine your own processes. And I look forward to hearing how your design continues to evolve after this. Thank you. That was it.
Thank you very much, Cristoffer. That was
Thank you.
really, really interesting. And I think we all learned a lot from all this. So now we will hold a questions and answers session for, well, 15 minutes is what we usually aim for, but we'll see how many questions we have. And if you have any questions, you can either raise your hand with the tool in the bottom of the screen or by writing in the chat.
Yes.
Yes. Or
Everybody's
if you have your webcam on, you can also wave and we'll see you. Yeah. Okay. Is there any question? Anyone who wants to go first? Yes, Mo.
Hi. How are you, Tobias?
Yeah, I'm good. How are you?
I think I missed last month. Sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. Yes. Did
Okay,
you have
I
a
was-
question for?
Of
Yeah.
course. Okay, thank you so much. That was really interesting and interestingly spiritual, I think, also.
Yeah,
In-
nice to hear. It's after doing this for so long, it's become so big that you think about it all the time.
Yeah. It's not my primary thing. I've done so many different things over my life, but they all coalesce really well into game design. And
True.
I notice in the modern game world, there's this thing between the hobbyists and the very serious gamers and the casual and what people call family weight. But I grew up playing old traditional games with just a poker deck or dominoes. And I'm fascinated by folk games, I guess you could call it, because people get really invested. It's not 6 hours of Twilight Imperium, it's 6 hours of Mahjong.
Exactly. Yes.
And where do you put that in the spectrum of product versus player? Because it's just the same 118 tiles for Mahjong or 52 cards for like Euchre or Bridge, but people really get invested and make social events of it.
Yeah, this is a good cross section actually, because the product in itself is for example, any card game that uses a regular 50 deck card, it's sort of like the mechanism first, but because they jumped through hoops to use that same deck in a new and different and fantastic way, and then the rest is just player centric. It's about the experience that you do together when you come together as a culture, as a team, or as a family or friends. You come together and you play this artifact, this thing that uses a regular deck of cards that you've seen before, but in a new way. So it sort of it's mostly, I would say, a cultural thing, a player first thing, but it goes very much into the idea of, I have this deck of cards, and I've grown tired of playing the same way every time now, so I need to either invent a new one, or I will learn or teach someone a thing that I have found or something like that, a new way to play with these cards. And the same goes for Mahjong or any of the other ones, because you have the same thing and it's about mastery. Then for Mahjong, for example, or chess, for example, it's about mastery. So it's not as much about culture, for example, but it is playing that game forever. But then if you play the same card game forever, it's usually not for mastery, but for enjoyment of the collaboration of people that coming together as a group of people instead. So that's mostly player centric. Did I ramble too much, or did that answer your question more?
It's helping. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Anders.
Yes, great. Yeah, Anders wrote in the chat before.
Okay.
A quick one about the focus map. What was the vertical axis?
Oh, the vertical axis. Let's see. I need to go back to see because I always forget. So in just a second, here we go. Vertical axis. Complexity and accessibility.
And
just the horizontal.
Since we mentioned the vertical axis, what was the horizontal axis?
Product to player.
Product and player. Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. And he also wrote that we should remember that several of these real classic games have been perfected through generations of alterations and variant rules, where the most popular ones stayed and were incorporated into the game. I agree. It's probably what would happen if player-focused design had timelines that spanned lifetimes. Those are self-reasonable deadlines for us humble designers.
No, exactly. I wish we had that product development
generations
timeline. Yeah, exactly.
Be nice.
That would be, and also the amount of testers that goes into a generational game like that. That's huge. Specifically, if you can reuse the same testers over like a 30-year period, that's good. That's great.
Yeah. Just design the next chess, I guess. That's that's a simple task, right?
Yeah. It's good there to remember as well. I think it was chess actually came to Europe 3 times, but the first 2 times they weren't interesting enough, so nobody picked it up. So they sort of reintroduced it twice, and the 3rd time was when it had changed enough to look close enough to what it looks today. So then when the rich people actually started playing it, so it spread over Europe, because before it was more a game that I wouldn't say the poor people played, but it wasn't the rich and famous. It wasn't the aristocracy. But then when the 3rd time it came into Europe, it was brought up and then played by the aristocracy, and they spread it over the entire continent for the games to become what it is today.
That's cool.
If I remember correctly.
I take your word for it.
That makes it similar to modern Western ballet. I actually studied dance at university, and a lot of what you were saying applies to choreography as well. I see so many young people on social media, and they fill every second of a piece of music with dance, and they're going for this hard complexity in the product, and I don't feel anything in the audience.
No.
And with ballet, it started based on peasant folk dance, was reinterpreted, elevated to elite status, and then went back down.
Yep. Yeah, dancing is very similar to the design lenses in a way, but again over a wider time scale. I hope I wasn't too overcomplicated. I do.
I don't think so. People will ask questions if you were, I guess, if they want something clarified. And I was wondering about one thing that I think you mentioned it, but I think I might have missed the point. Are there any tools or tricks to use when you want to refocus your design for the product or the player, so to speak?
Well, yeah. If you ask yourself where the product is now, that will give you a sort of like a focal point, because it's good to know what like if you want to move that arrow somewhere along the line of, like, if it's a product first or a player first, you first need to understand where you are. So asking yourself that question, like, what is actually happening with my game now? How are people like, how are players perceiving it, and how what am I trying to do? Like, if you're building like intricate systems, you probably know where you are. But and at the same time, if you're slashing away and taking away components out of the product, you probably know that you're on the player side as well. So again, it's sort of like just looking on where you are will help you define what the product is currently doing. And then you can start to look at if you want to go more towards the player or more towards the product, depending on what you're trying to do. And again, it's all about finding that that focus. But again, to answer a different questions, but that could be interesting for other the people here, is that just because you do this, there's always another company that wants to probably, like, produce your game. So depending on what the game looks like currently, you pitch it to a bunch of publishers and they say no. But some of them will probably, if they're good, they'll give you hints on what they actually see the product to be for them. And that could be more towards the player centric or more towards the system. But that is good to know, that just because the game right now did not gather enough interest from game companies doesn't mean that the game isn't viable. It's just not maybe viable right now as is, because you could shelve that and in 2 years come back and it could actually, you could have a new Flash and you strip down 2 components and it becomes totally viable again. So it's good to remember that just because your game currently where it's placed might not work, it could work by just altering it a little bit. So don't throw away stuff, but be open to change stuff along the way, because that will save you a lot of production time as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good answer. Thank you. Yes. Do we have any other questions from the floor?
Everything is totally
Crystal clear. Yeah.
Crystal clear. Or I was just,
yeah.
so boring that everybody is now asleep.
I think we have seen some life signs from a lot of the audience, actually. Yeah. So yeah, don't think so. Yeah, okay. Do you have any closing thoughts before we take a short break?
Me?
Yeah.
Okay. No, it's from my point, it was fantastic to be here and talk about this. I hope that I delivered some coherent thoughts and something that you can use. And also, if you want to engage with me in any way, you are welcome to contact me. You can, Tobias knows all my contact information. I do show up at from time to time on the Discord, and I also am one of the people running the Swedish Facebook group, Speldesignträffar. So you can find me there as well. And if you find me at a con or whatever, don't hesitate to jog up to me and ask questions, or just if you want to talk. I'm always open to talking. It's the love my love for game design and talking about game design is something that I'm trying to, balancing out. I apparently have a family that I need to take care of as well. So.
Yeah, some things get in the way of the game design. And
exactly
stuff like
what I'm
that,
trying to say. But,
And of course, we want to say a big thank you to you as well for holding this presentation. And we are very happy that you could join us and do this.
Yeah. Thank you. I'll
yes.
I'll be here after the break as well. So.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I was just going to ask. So thank you everyone who joined as well. We will now take a short break of about I think 13 minutes, and at 10 a.m. we will continue. 10 p.m. of course. We will continue this discussion for those who want to stick around. And I will see you in a bit. Thank you.
Yes.
Bye.
Yeah. See you later.